So if you've decided to set up a business in Canada and you've chosen a corporation as the legal structure for that business, how do you actually go about incorporating in Canada? Well, first off, what is a corporation? As I mentioned, it's a legal structure. So it's a legal structure for a business. And basically, it's a separate legal entity from a human. So what I tell everyone is think of that word corp. In English, corpse is a body. Corporal means pertaining to the body. So to incorporate means to embody. So when you go through the incorporation process and you create a corporation, you're creating a separate legal entity from yourself. In a lot of ways, it's very much like a separate human. Not completely the same as a separate human, but this separate legal entity has its own tax return, it has its own bank account, it can have assets, it can have liabilities, it can have credit accounts and credit scores, it can be the signer on leases, it has its own sales tax accounts like GST, HST, PST, and also things like municipal business licenses are typically tied to that separate legal entity, the corporation. Now, before I get into the details and the options for incorporating in Canada, I just wanted to warn you that there are downsides to incorporating. Some people just get really excited to start a corporation and they feel like it makes the most sense for their business without really considering the pros and cons or doing any research on it. And I think I was one of those people back when I was studying business in university and learning about the different legal structures. It just seemed like, why would you not incorporate? You get this extra liability protection and you get some extra tax strategy and stuff like that. But there are some downsides to incorporating. A corporation is more money to start, it is more money to maintain, it is more work to start, and it is more work to maintain. In some cases, it totally makes sense and that's the best option. And in other cases, it really doesn't, it's not worth it to incorporate. The benefits don't outweigh the costs. Okay, so that all being said, how do you actually go about incorporating in Canada? Well, you have two main options. You can either set up your corporation as a federal corporation through Corporations Canada, or you can go through the incorporation process and create a provincial corporation in the province in which you're located or you want the business to be located. Now, one thing to be aware of with the federal incorporation process is that it doesn't stop there. Once you create a federal corporation, you actually have to do what's called an extra-provincial registration of that federal corporation. So let's say, for example, you're based in Manitoba, your business is going to be based in Manitoba, and you choose to federally incorporate, that's fine, but you have to do an extra-provincial registration of that federal corporation into the province of Manitoba. And then if you're conducting business in any other provinces, then typically you have to do that extra-provincial registration of your federal corporation into those subsequent provinces as well. And in terms of the benefits of federally incorporating, in my opinion, there aren't that many benefits to federally incorporating. In some cases, it might make sense, but the biggest benefit is that if you federally incorporate using a word name for your corporation, then that word name is protected across Canada. Whereas if you just start by provincially incorporating with a word name, then that word name is only protected in the province in which you're registered. Now, whether you're going with a provincial or federal corporation, you don't necessarily have to go with a word name. You can just go with a numbered name like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, Saskatchewan LTD or Canada LTD or Inc. or whatever you want. However, if you're going to set up a federal corporation under a numbered name, in my opinion, for the most part, that defeats the purpose. Because if you're setting up a federal corporation, typically that's one of the benefits you're going to be receiving is that name protection across Canada. So if you're just going with a numbered name, you're not really getting any protection of any word name. And therefore, if you are federally incorporating, when you do that, you should use a word name, and therefore that word name is protected across Canada, and that word name becomes the legal name of the corporation. So if you decide to move forward with this, whether you're federally incorporating or provincially incorporating, I recommend getting professional assistance. And typically the best option would be going to a lawyer, and specifically one that works in business and corporate law. They're typically specialists in helping with corporations and the incorporation process. Sometimes accountants can help with this as well, and then sometimes business consultants like myself can help with the incorporation process. So how do you actually do it, and what are the fees? Well, if you're going to go with a federal corporation to start out with, it's $14 to do the name reservation, and then it's $200 to actually incorporate. And you can actually just do that yourself online through Corporations Canada. But again, I do recommend getting some professional assistance with this process, just because it is a little bit complicated, especially when it comes to choosing things like your share structures and then assigning directors and officers and things like that. And there are just little steps with incorporating that you don't want to miss, because it can come and create problems for you in the future, and they can be expensive. And now if you're choosing just to set up your corporation as a provincial corporation, then that's a bit easier. You don't actually have to do a federal registration of that corporation after you do that. It's just if you're moving into another province, setting up there, conducting business there, then you still need to do that extra registration of your provincial corporation. Now, in terms of fees for provincial corporations, obviously that can vary from province to province. Every province has their own system, their own, ways of incorporating, their own fees and stuff like that. But on average, I would say about $300 or so, $300 to $400 to incorporate provincially when it comes to the actual fees of the corporate registry in the province. Now, if you are getting a professional to help you, let's say you found a lawyer to help you incorporate in your province, typically lawyers are going to charge, maybe starting at $1,200 to $1,500 on top of the corporate registry fees, up to maybe $2,000 or $3,000. So this can get kind of expensive once you include those professional fees. But again, I do recommend it unless you're comfortable with this process and you have, maybe a very simple corporate structure that you're wanting to set up. Now, one other thing to be aware of is that there are legal names and trade names. So every legal entity has a legal name, whether that's a human entity or a corporation. And now those legal entities can register trade names. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I would recommend that if you're going to incorporate federally, that the legal name of the corporation is also the trade name of the business so that you get that name protection across Canada. Because if you just set up your corporation as a numbered corporation and then later you want to register a trade name to it, trade names can actually only be registered provincially. So you have your federal corporation as a numbered corporation, extra-provincially registered in your province, and then in your province you can later register that trade name. But because you're only registering that trade name provincially, it's only protected in that province. And another important note is that you can actually have multiple trade names registered to a single corporation or a single human entity. And now the last couple points in the video here is that once you actually set up your business, once you've formally incorporated, you have to do what's called annual renewals for the corporation. So if you're just setting up a provincial corporation, then obviously you just have to do the annual renewals in your province. And the price of that can vary. Where I'm located in Saskatchewan, it's a $60 fee. And that annual renewal basically keeps your corporation active and alive. And this annual renewal is completely separate from the annual tax filing of the corporation, which you'll want to do as well. And that is what's called a T2 tax return, which is completely separate from your personal taxes as a human entity. Whereas with federal corporations, if you have a federal corporation, you still have to file an annual renewal with Corporations Canada on top of filing the annual renewal with the province in which the business is registered. And with the federal renewals, they're only $12. So hopefully this video was useful and not too confusing. I know this subject is a little bit complicated, but I will leave a link to Corporations Canada in the video description below so that you can read up a little bit more on federal corporations if you're interested. And if you did find this video helpful, please click like and feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel here, where I currently have almost 300 videos that cover business management and business startup topics. Many of them focused on Canadian specific content like this video, and then many of them focused on Saskatchewan specific content, which is where I'm located and where I serve my clients.